I know Delegate Hope was finishing up chairing the Public Safety Committee, so he should be here shortly. But Madam Clerk, if you call the names of those who have not voted.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Delegate Hope. Delegate Hope is not present. Delegate Simon.
Present.
Delegate Simon is present. Delegate Leftwich. Delegate Leftwich is present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. You can close the roll. We have a quorum.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right. I know we've got a very, very full agenda today. Lots of bills on the agenda today. So we'll have to be quick. There's one bill on the agenda, committee members and public, for those in the viewing pleasure. It's House Bill 2045, patroned by yours truly. And so, because I can't chair and present at the same time, I'm going to turn the gavel over to, since Delegate Hope is not here, I believe Delegate Simon.
All right, got it. All right, so first up on our agenda is House Bill 2045 from Delegate Bourne. Delegate Bourne, why don't you take a minute to present your bill, and then we'll talk a little bit about where we think this is going, and then we'll hear from the public.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2045 is not secret or is new to anybody on this committee. It creates a state cause of action modeled closely after Section 1983 of our federal law, whereby if a person's constitutional rights have been violated or they've been deprived of those by a law enforcement officer, the plaintiff may be awarded compensatory damages, punitive damages, and equitable relief. In addition, the crux of the bill eliminates the ability of that officer to plead sovereign immunity in state courts, and qualified immunity obviously is the same or similar defense in federal courts. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the bill also attaches a potential cause of action against any public or private entity that employs or contracts for the services of a law enforcement officer by way of a duty of reasonable care to third parties in its hiring, supervision, training, and retention of those officers in its employment or contract. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we heard this in our special session over the summer. There was lots of debate. It went through, I think, just about every committee in the House with the exception of Ag. And throughout that process, I heard arguments for and against it and tried to address those in this bill. One of the things that we've done in this version of the bill is place a cap on individual officers' liability, much like they have done in Colorado. Other than that, the bill remains largely the same, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I do know that there are probably a number of people who want to testify both for and against this bill, but I submit House Bill 2045 for your consideration.
All right, I see that Delegate Hope appears to have entered the room, although his camera is not yet turned on. So before I hand the gavel back up the seniority chain to him, are there any questions or comments from committee members for Delegate Bourne? And seeing none, let me just say for my part, Delegate Bourne, I want to thank you for your hard work on this bill. And I know you, as you said, you've done a lot of work and tried to bring everybody together. At the special session, as I recall, the real stumbling block came in the Senate. And I think that one of the implicit agreements here was that they would continue to work, and we'd work together with them to try and see if we could address some of the concerns some of the lawyers over there had. I think, personally think they maybe were over lawyering the issue, but my understanding is we haven't really come together in the months since the special session ended with the Senate to get there and to get to a consensus. And so I suspect that what we'll probably want to do to give this bill the best chance to continue to move forward and continue that discussion and try and bring some of these other folks on board would be to move this over to the Crime Commission. I know I've spoken with Delegate Herring, who's the chairman of the full committee and also chairman of the Crime Commission. And she has said that should we in the subcommittee elect to lay this on the table and request a letter to the Crime Commission, she would certainly write such a letter, and in her capacity as chair, do everything she could to prioritize moving this issue to the top of the agenda so that we could get to that consensus that we're all trying to achieve. So that's sort of my little preamble there. I noticed the Delegate Hope has turned his camera back on, so I'll hand the gavel. I know he's been busy chairing public safety, back to him so he can take over. And I might suggest to Delegate Hope as I hand it over, given I think what's likely to happen, I know there may be a lot of people in the queue, but if they might want to keep their comments relatively brief to identify themselves and their position rather than try to get too much into the details, probably help move things along for everybody. But
so I would say, is your motion, Delegate Simon, to lay the bill on the table with a letter recommend a letter to the Crime Commission to take a look at this?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to make that motion yet because it's not debatable. And I think there are folks in the public that would would like to be heard from. I just maybe would signal to them that rather than spend a full minute or so talking to us about the substance of the bill, they might just sort of check in to let us know who they are, what organization they're with, and whether they're for or against, as a way to sort of put all that on the record.
All right, Madam Clerk, can we bring people in from the audience? I mean, first, is there anyone that has any questions for the patron before we do that? So I don't see any hands raised. So why don't we go ahead and go to the audience? And Ms. Johnson, how many people do we have signed up to speak for and against the bill?
For about 10 to 12, against at least 15 to 20. And we have asked all speakers to limit their comments to 1 minute.
Okay, let's do that. So let's bring people in.
All right, our first speaker, Dominique Martin.
1 minute and briefer is better.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Dominique Martin, Policy Research Analyst, New Virginia Majority. We support this bill because we have been supportive of legislation that seeks to increase transparency and accountability from our law enforcement officers. Qualified immunity, as it's been interpreted and adjudicated, acts as a barrier to accountability and signals to law enforcement that bad behavior can go unpunished. The sentiment has been expressed multiple times by Supreme Court justices and constitutional scholars alike, including Justice Sotomayor, saying recent decisions suggest to officers they can act with impunity. People should be able to have their day in court and believe that there is a legitimate process or remedy for those who feel mistreated by state officials. This bill can improve community relations also with the institution of law enforcement by signaling that citizens can hold government actors to account. And so we thank the patron again for carrying this legislation and shedding light on this important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Giselle Ball with Students Demand Action at VCU.
Good morning, Chair and members of the subcommittee. My name is Jed Ball, and I'm the founder and president of Students Demand Action at VCU. I'm here today to testify in support of HB 2045 because for too long we've seen Black men and women and people from other marginalized communities die at the hands of the police state and white supremacy. With George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, countless others, and here in Virginia we have Marcus David Peters and now Xavier Hill, and all of them should be alive today. With 95% of civilians killed by police being killed with a firearm, and Black people being nearly 3 times more likely to be shot and killed. Without true police accountability, we will continue to watch more people die as a result of police violence, and officers will get away with a slap on the wrist. And police violence and white supremacy will continue to run rampant if we are unwilling to hold bad actors accountable by passing meaningful reforms. Last summer, I watched this bill die in committee over the objections of the Black members of the committee, leaving me and countless others demanding more through protests and other means. Now has to be the time to end qualified immunity because there is no other option, because police violence is gun violence. And if we are dedicated to ending gun violence and dismantling systemic racism, we need to hold police responsible for killing BIPOC Americans, and that starts with ending qualified immunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Isaac Macbeth with Virginia Trial Lawyers Association.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Isaac Macbeth on behalf of the Virginia Trial Lawyers Association. VTLA is here today to express its support for HB 2045, and we want to take a moment to flag the importance of this legislation passing through the state legislature. Given the current composition of the Supreme Court and other dynamics in federal court, there's really no discernible path forward for legislative reform or judicial reform in the federal courts. If we want civil rights to be valued at the level that they should be valued at in the Commonwealth, we're going to have to open the doors of the Commonwealth up. And that's exactly what this legislation does. And it enables us to have the tools to not only hold individual officers accountable, but to try and find when and where these instances of sort of institutional climate are being perpetuated through police leadership. And if you want to make a change, it has to change on both of those levels. So for that reason, VTLA hopes it's the pleasure of this body to report the bill. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Heather Foglio with Virginia Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America.
Hi, I'm Heather Foglio from with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, and we support this bill. Police violence is gun violence, but when officers use excessive force, they're frequently protected from consequences through policies like qualified immunity. The risk of being sued often discourages people from doing harm, but qualified immunity shields police officers from this risk. Qualified immunity makes it nearly impossible to sue a police officer for violating your rights. It has frustrated the ability of our communities to hold police officers accountable when rights have been violated. Removing the shield of qualified immunity would enable people to sue the police and hold them accountable. So we are supporting this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Kayla Harris with Virginia Student Power Network.
Good morning, delegates. My name is Kalia Harris from the Virginia Student Power Network, a statewide organization that represents hundreds of young people throughout the state, and I'm urging you to vote yes. When we held a teach-in to protest police violence this summer, we were met with a militarized response from police in Virginia and Richmond State Police. That night is still on replay in my head, and words can't explain the feeling of trauma that we experienced that night. Yet when we took our case to court, the court failed to hold the police accountable. We were denied justice, and Virginia needs a law that will give people harmed by police violence the unqualified right to sue police in state court for their unconstitutional actions. At the very least, we should be able to have our day in court, and this bill will do just that. And you all, the legislators, have the power. Vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Jenny Glass, ACLU.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jenny Glass. I'm the Director of Advocacy for the ACLU of Virginia. I'm here today on behalf of ACLU of Virginia and its more than 100,000 members and supporters in Virginia. We urge this committee to pass HB 2045, which would create a way for community members to sue police for damages in state court if their constitutional rights have been violated without the shield of qualified immunity. No more, no less. What's happening with this bill, passing it off to the Crime Commission, punting it to the Senate, is not what community members who have been harmed, who deserve their day in court want or deserve. We urge you to pass this bill today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Glass. Next speaker.
Princess Blanding, Justice and Reform.
And greetings. My name is Princess Blanding, co-founder of Justice and Reformation, sister of the late Marcus David Peters and soon to be governor of Virginia. I come here today in support of Delegate Jeff Bourne's House Bill HB 2045. I would be remiss if I did not say that here in Virginia and across the nation, as a working class citizen, as an educator, Black woman, single mother, and LGBTQ community member, when I think of our criminal justice system and listen to the Pledge of Allegiance that is recited each day in our public schools, a chilling reminder comes across my body that this broken system absolutely does not ensure liberty and justice for all. As too much of Virginia's current legislation is divided and gravely biased, reminding our marginalized and Black community members that it truly is just us. From nurses to doctors to educators, there's a heavy level of accountability. However, there is very low, almost non-existent levels of accountability for our police officers in Virginia, leaving Virginians and their surviving family members with limited ability to sue police for their excessive use of force and unconstitutional acts, such as in the case of the late Marcus David Peters and now Xavier Hill. We, the citizens of Virginia, will not sit silently or passively and allow this bill to be written off yet again. Liberation is a human right for all Virginians, not a privilege. Get it right and vote to end qualified immunity now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Anna Ciali from Richmond.
Hi, my name is Anna Shalley. I live in Richmond, Virginia. I urge you to support HB 2045. Currently, qualified immunity allows police to use excessive force and other illegal and unconstitutional tactics without accountability. We have seen how this disproportionately affects Virginians marginalized by our criminal justice system, especially Black Virginians. It is a violation of our constitutional rights. Please support HB 2045 and end qualified immunity today.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Danielle de Blasio from Richmond.
Good morning. My name is Danielle de Blasio. I am speaking on behalf of the Liberation Party of Virginia. We are asking that you pass HB 2045, and thank you, Delegate Bourne, for carrying this bill. We see far too often that police use violence against our community members without fear of consequence or repercussion. And this is quite literally a public safety issue for our Black and Brown community members. We also ask that you maintain clear and precise language in this bill so that we don't receive, at the very end of this, a watered down bill with language that will not hold police accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Gabrielle Brost from Richmond. Gabrielle Brost from Richmond. I just got a message that she was present but is no longer present.
All right, let's go to the next speaker.
Okay, the next speakers are speaking against the bill. Okay, our first speaker is Volk Boykin from Carsville.
1 minute. Welcome. Is he in the room?
I am going to find out.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. Welcome.
Okay, welcome and thank you, committee, for having me. My name is Volpe Boykin of Carsville, Virginia. I'm here in opposition of HB 2045. I'm a retired Norfolk police officer and 45-year veteran of the Virginia Fraternal Order of Police. It is not missed on police officers, and I can say a lot of things current officers cannot say, that this bill is it's a camel's nose under the tent bill, even though it's not as bad as the other one. But this says a lot. A local police chief said to me not long ago, which he could never say in public, if a young person comes to me who's not already invested in the profession and wants to get into law enforcement, I already know they're not smart enough to do the job, because nowadays anybody smart enough to do the job would not want to do the job. That says a lot. What do Black and Brown communities do without police? They're the ones that suffer. What do they do when police officers are afraid to go enforce the law in their communities? They suffer. Criminals that are being released that shouldn't be released, they're not coming to my neighborhood or yours. They're going back to Black and Brown communities and victimizing them. I worked many years in those communities. I know where the criminals go back to when they get out of prison. It also puts an unfair burden on officers. They won't take any chance in taking a job if they can personally lose what they have. It's easier just to take another job, and you need to ask yourself this: as it's getting more difficult and more difficult and more difficult to find people that want that job, what are you planning to do when nobody wants it? Because you're getting to that stage because you can't find me an agency that isn't severely lacking in applicants for open positions. And as of the people that have been unjustly killed by police, you also should take into account that those were out of millions and millions of interactions with law enforcement. Doctors don't have that good of a record when it comes to accidental deaths by medical negligence. And thank you for hearing me this morning, and I ask you to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
That was a long minute.
That was
Yes.
a long minute. Please try to keep your remarks to 1 minute.
Wayne Hudgens, Virginia State Police Association.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Good morning, Mr. Hudgens.
Qualified immunity is a topic that is widely misunderstood, and the impression has been created that we in law enforcement are immune from civil liability and have blanket immunity. This is simply not true. Law enforcement is frequently sued. And as the title suggests, we must qualify for immunity. To qualify, we must be able to demonstrate we acted reasonably in accordance with the Constitution, applicable laws, and our department's policy. The elimination of qualified immunity would open the door for countless frivolous lawsuits. It is my opinion that this would serve as a major impediment for us to be able to hire the most qualified men and women to become troopers. We lost 36 state police troopers in 1 month period from December of 2020 through January of 2021. With approximately 300 existing trooper vacancies, the elimination of qualified immunity would not only create impediment, but again, would prevent us from hiring the most qualified men and women. Finally, and in closing, Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito in the 2009 decision may have said it best when he said, qualified immunity balances two important interests: the need to hold public officials accountable when they exercise power irresponsibly, and the need to shield officials from harassment, distraction, and liability when they perform their duties reasonably. We ask you to please kill House Bill 2045.
Thank you. Are there how many more speakers do we have, Ms. Johnson?
At least 15 to 20.
Okay, so why don't we do this?
Do you want me to time?
Let's time them, and I'm telling you, everyone, please keep your comments brief. I don't think there's any reason to repeat what's already been said. Shorter is better.
Okay. Okay. Our next speaker, David Corrigan from Henrico County.
David, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a limit of 10 minutes on this total. So if you take too much time, then everyone else behind you won't get a chance to speak.
I understand. Thank you. David Corrigan, I'm an attorney, and for the last 20 years, I've represented police officers and local governments in lawsuits, including the types of lawsuits that are issued here. I can tell you I have won cases and I have lost cases. You can sue police officers in Virginia under the current law, and it does happen with some frequency. This bill is not Section 1983. This bill, my reading of this bill is that every time there's an encounter between a police officer and a citizen, that citizen will be able to sue not only the police officer involved, but also any other police officers who happen to be present and the local government, none of which is possible under the law today in the fashion that this bill allows without any standard of liability clearly enunciated. I think that you need to strike a balance if you're going to address this issue, and this is the wrong bill. It doesn't strike the right balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
John Jones with Virginia Sheriff's Association.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm John Jones, and I represent 118 of the 123 sheriffs and more than 9,000 deputy sheriffs in Virginia. We are opposed to House Bill 2045 for the following reasons. It creates a cause of action for frivolous lawsuits against law enforcement officers. Sheriffs and deputy sheriffs currently have exposure to liability. Let me tell you about one such case, and I'll be quick within my minute. In Halifax County in 2012, there was a sheriff race in which the challenger defeated the incumbent, thus inheriting the lawsuit when he took office, a lawsuit that the incumbent had had. The case resulted in a judgment that exceeded the then limit of the Virginia risk of $1 million. The plaintiff then turned to the new sheriff's home for relief and found out he could get it. So the General Assembly addressed that and passed a bill, and this bill removes those protections. We are very concerned about the personal liability qualified. We have a 35% turnover rate, and this will create an exodus of law enforcement officers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Next speaker.
Sean McGowan with Virginia Police Benevolent Association.
Will it go to the next speaker?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm here.
Oh, there you go.
Sean McGowan, Virginia Police Benevolent Association, representing 7,000 Virginia law enforcement professionals. Just to build on what Mr. Huggins said, the PBA deals with civil lawsuits every single day against officers, and qualified immunity rarely plays into the decision of that case moving forward. This qualified immunity has just become a buzzword for campaigns to gain votes. A vote for this bill is anti-law enforcement, is anti-public safety, and frankly, it is it's a problem looking, a solution looking for a problem, and we hope that you will kill this bill.
Next speaker.
Michelle Gowdy with Virginia Municipal League.
Good morning, Michelle Gowdy with the Virginia Municipal League. We ask that you not favorably act upon this bill for the reasons that Mr. Hudgens and Mr. Corrigan have already provided. But I do want to say that officers do not have absolute immunity right now. They can be held liable when they've had a clearly established constitutional right. And secondly, we are concerned about the effect of what will happen with law enforcement officers when they have outside jobs, like working in security at a concert or at high school football games and things like that. That liability may come back to the locality, which may result in localities banning officers from working those sorts of activities. So for those reasons, we ask that you not act favorably on this bill.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Ara Tramblian with Virginia Association of Defense Attorneys.
Morning. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. My name is Ara Tramblian. I'm a member of the Virginia Association of Defense Attorneys, and I've been practicing in the local government area for over 30 years. And I have a lot of things I could say about this bill that other people have covered, but let me talk about something I don't think anyone has covered. And I haven't heard much consideration of how this bill would work in practice. What are the nuts and bolts of how it would work? It would upset the balance in the partnership that law enforcement has with the legislature and with the courts, and would unfairly put the results of what the legislature or courts get wrong onto the police officers or sheriff's deputies. If the Congress or the General Assembly passes an unconstitutional law and someone is arrested or prosecuted as a result, the legislatures face no consequences of civil liability because they have absolute immunity. Similarly, if a magistrate or judge issues a warrant or order that is executed but is later found to be flawed, they also face no liability because they have absolute immunity. And this is the result even though the legislature and the courts have time to consider and debate their actions. But by stripping away immunities, a police officer who's in the trenches trying to carry out the law as prescribed by the General Assembly, or to execute a warrant that's issued by a magistrate and has to make often split-second decisions, would have no protection whatsoever. So if a sheriff's deputy or a police officer picks up an arrest warrant that he had no role in obtaining and simply executes it, and it's later determined that the law was flawed or the warrant shouldn't have been issued, that police officer, sheriff's deputy, is now strictly liable under this bill. He has no protection, even though he had no role in obtaining the warrant or in passing the law. Qualified immunity is a doctrine that was enacted just for that purpose, so that a police officer or sheriff's deputy is not responsible for the mistakes that the General Assembly makes or might make, or that a magistrate or a judge would make.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Remaining speakers that are in opposition, please tell me something new of your opposition that hasn't already been said. That would be really helpful. Next speaker.
John Clare with Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police.
Mr. Clare.
Good morning. My name is John Clare.
Anything new you want to share with us that hasn't already been stated in opposition?
I'd only like to say that as I read the bill, Chairman, this bill says that there's no reasonable use for qualified immunity in law enforcement. And we seem to admit that there are reasonable uses in the criminal justice system as a whole. And I find it difficult to accept and confusing that there's no reasonable use for that type of doctrine in law enforcement, period. It leaves police officers confused, especially conscientious officers like myself who have heard the criticisms and empathize with those who are critical of our profession. We all admit that there are systemic inequalities. This doesn't strike me as a systemic solution. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Robert Melvin with Virginia Restaurant, Lodging, and Travel Association.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Robert Melvin with the Virginia Restaurant, Lodging, and Travel Association. I'm sure many of you recall the civil unrest over the summer in Richmond that resulted in significant property damage for many of our hotel and restaurant members in the city. And, you know, we have significant concerns about this bill and the way that's drafted and the impact it could have on our, our members here in the Commonwealth. So we urge you to vote against it at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. How many more speakers remaining, Ms. Johnson? I'm at 10 minutes after I've said 10 minutes.
10 to 12 more speakers.
10 to 12 more speakers. I'm gonna allow 1 more minute of testimony, and then the rest will say your name. They're speaking here in opposition. 1 more minute. Next speaker.
Andrew Moss.
I like the way they want to limit us.
Next speaker.
Okay, Dylan Bishop.
Of the committee, Dylan Bishop on behalf of the Virginia Law Enforcement Sheriffs. I'll leave you with 1 point. This bill would expose deputy sheriffs to individual liability of up to $25,000 for certain actions. I will remind you the starting salary for a state-supported law enforcement deputy is below $34,000 a year. So that's over 3/4 of their annual salary. We're not incentivizing these men and women to take these tough jobs. So I'd urge the committee to pass by this bill indefinitely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. 1 more speaker. I've given the opposition more time than the pro side.
David Westcott from Chesapeake.
All right, you're live.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. David Westcott on behalf of the city of Chesapeake. As pursuant to our legislative package this year for this General Assembly, we're opposed to this bill and any measures as outlined by Michelle Gowdy with Virginia Municipal League. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, would you read the names of the people who haven't spoken that are here in opposition? Just read
Yes. Heidi Meinzer from Chesapeake. Jeffrey Katz, not present, but he was signed up with Chesterfield County Police Department and VACP. Kirsten Lee, also from Chesterfield. Kamran Afzal from Hopewell Police Department. Nathan Green from Virginia Association of Commonwealth's Attorneys. Brian Haskins from Virginia Association of Commonwealth's Attorneys. Steve Trevette, not present, from the town of Ashland. Chuck Slemp from Virginia Association of Commonwealth's Attorneys. Phyllis Arico from Virginia Association of Counties. Mark Segal from Hanover Sheriff's Association. Sean McGowan from Virginia Police Benevolent Association. And Queen Richardson from Sound Movement in Richmond.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I gave more time to the opposition than the pro side, which was usually what I don't do as chair, by the way. I'm trying to be fair. So let's throw it back to the subcommittee. Are there any questions for the patron? And I don't see any hands raised. I like the hand raise function, but is it Delegate Simon? Do you have a?
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, real quickly, I supported this bill during the special session, voted for it, tried to help whip votes for it, get it to the Senate. I think that our committee, the Uber chair of our committee, Leader Herring, who's also the chair of the Crime Commission, thinks the best place to continue this conversation and the way we can control it best would be at the Crime Commission. If we send it over to the Senate, you know, we lose sort of control over the narrative. They told us last time we sent it there that they would work on it. Again, to date, I haven't seen a lot of progress from that body. And so with that, in an effort to really keep this moving forward and try and get some constructive movement and bridge some of the gap between the two sides on this, I would move that we gently lay the bill on the table with a letter from the chairman of the full committee to the Crime Commission herself as chair of the Crime Commission, asking that she prioritize this bill in the interim.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Bourne.
Before the motion is seconded, since it's not debatable, might I just conclude with a few words?
Precisely what I was going to say. Delegate Bourne.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Chair, Delegate Sullivan. it is clear to me where this bill is headed and what the fate is this year. But I do feel the need to address some of the inaccuracies, misinformation, and disinformation that was communicated by many of those who oppose this bill. I think it is offensive to all of us here, all of the people who support this bill, to suggest that we don't understand what it does and what it is. Second, I think it belittles the reasons and the circumstances and the deaths and the injuries that bring about the need to reform our immunity related to law enforcement actions. We are all well-versed in the horrific examples throughout this country and unfortunately even in our Commonwealth. And what we're simply saying is that if a law enforcement officer violates your constitutional rights, and there are many that oppose this in the summer and today, who swear that they are all about law and order and all about upholding the Constitution and want us to protect and respect their constitutional rights. But when it seems when we're talking about this, and we're talking about people getting hurt and their constitutional rights deprived by law enforcement officers, the story becomes different. So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I fully understand where this is headed, what's going to happen, and I just hope that we can have an honest policy discussion at the Crime Commission level, rather than be victim to this vitriolic language that seems to cloud and confuse folks on what this is actually seeking to accomplish.
Thank you, Delegate Bourne. Thank you for bringing this bill.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Picking up on your comment, Mr. Chair, I also thank Delegate Bourne for bringing this bill, and I just want to say how not surprisingly, I'm impressed by the skill and passion with which Delegate Bourne has been an advocate for this bill. I admire his commitment, his passion, his tenacity, and frankly expect that will continue, because I know Delegate Bourne well, and what's going to happen this morning is not going to diminish his efforts on this. We all face difficult votes, and there are hard bills that the General Assembly faces. This is both a difficult bill and a hard vote. It is an enormously complex issue. I say that with my lawyer hat on. I do not say that to suggest that people don't understand it, because for sure its advocates, of course, understand it. Made even more complex in trying to work it through in this forum, because of course the body down the hall likes to make everything more complex. We all know, as Delegate Bourne said, the case law we've seen. We've read the decisions out of a variety of different circuit courts, and we know that the current system, the current way that qualified immunity is working, does not work, or at least in too many terribly tragic circumstances does not work. But I am hopeful, as I think Delegate Bourne suggested, that in a different kind of forum, the Crime Commission, a productive and more in-depth conversation can take place, and that we'll end up with something that will address this situation that will be less controversial, if not acceptable to both sides. So with that, Mr. Chair, and with a pretty heavy heart, I second Delegate Simon's motion.
A motion to lay House Bill 2045 on the table by Delegate Simon and seconded by Delegate Sullivan. It's non-debatable. All members wishing to cast their preference, please do so on the electronic voting device.
Delegate Simon?
Votes aye.
Delegate Simon votes aye.
Clerk will close the roll. Bill's laid on the table 6-2. Chairman Bourne, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with that, the committee's business is concluded, hopefully until after crossover. See you guys in a short little while at full committee. Committee stands adjourned.